Hey guys, it's Jay Calderon with 12rounder.com, and I'm here to bring you this week's edition of 12-Rounder Radio. Let's not waste any time. Let's get started. I'll give you some of the results from the previous weekend. Floyd Mayweather defended successfully his welterweight championship of the world against Mayweather-Maidana in a return. Pretty decent fight, but in the end it was Mayweather making the adjustments and making it a much less competitive fight and winning a very deserved unanimous decision. Over in Manchester, Scott Quigg took care of Stefan Jamoye and defended his version of the junior featherweight title. Anthony Joshua was also successful on that card as well. In terms of bringing it back to Vegas and the Mayweather-Maidana undercard, Leo Santa Cruz, another junior featherweight titleist, had some success as well, as did Humberto Soto and Mickey Bay. Mickey Bay, of course, took the lightweight version of the title from long-reigning titleist Miguel Vasquez, effectively making Miguel Vasquez the most avoided yet talented fighter in the sport. No one's going to be lining up to fight that guy. And of course, that was a fairly close/controversial decision, but in the end, it was one of those fights where very few people are likely to complain, as they were too busy complaining about the fight itself, so the result is not really their concern. In any event, to check out more of the results, you can click the link in the description, and we'll get right to the first topic of the week, which is fouling. Fouling in the sport of boxing. In other words, dirty tactics. Rabbit punching, low blows, taking a couple shots to the hip, some liberties on the inside, all these sort of things that experienced fighters tend to do on a fairly consistent basis and tend to get away with it. In the Mayweather-Maidana fight that I've already mentioned, there were a few things that fans seem to complain about from both sides, Mayweather and Maidana fans. Maidana isn't a guy that's totally against giving you a bit of a rabbit punch. Mayweather isn't a guy that's totally against putting a forearm in your face. But in this particular fight, the focus of the fouling and the people talking is a particular incident, I believe in the 8th round, might be the 7th, but I'm pretty sure it was the 8th round, where Mayweather seemed to be trying to muffle the breathing of Marcos Maidana on the inside and put his glove over the face of Maidana. Maidana didn't seem too interested in that happening, so in order to pay his man back, shall we say, he allegedly bit the hand of Mayweather, and Mayweather, rightfully so, complained to the referee, in this case Kenny Bayless, and you're left wondering, okay, well, for some people, you're left wondering, well, who's right, who's wrong here? If Mayweather was trying to muffle his breathing, maybe Maidana's not so wrong to retaliate. If Mayweather's not, then what Maidana did, certainly not a cool thing to do. Here's the problem. I'm going to assume, let's put it this way, I'm going to assume that both intended to do what they were alleged to have done. I think Mayweather is skilled enough to know that if his hand is right there next to Maidana's face, he's probably able to stop his breathing momentarily, just to get him a bit winded quickly, and then take advantage of it. I don't think for a guy as brilliant as Mayweather is in the ring that was somehow done by accident. I also don't think that I really don't think it's that difficult to see why many would argue that Maidana bit him. It looked, at least on replay, like there might have been some of that to a certain extent. I don't know how hard he bit him, or I can't for certain say that he intended to bite him if he even bit him. I don't see how that's possible that he didn't intend to bite someone. It's not like Mayweather fell into his teeth. I really don't see how that isn't obviously the case. That being said, here's my take on the personal issue. Or here's my personal take on the issue, I should say. I'm fine with it. I have no problem with either guy or what they did. I'm okay with fouling, and I know that's not necessarily the most popular opinion, but I just have no problem with it. I don't mind Mayweather trying to muffle him a little bit. I don't mind Maidana biting him in retaliation. I mean, it's a fight. You're trying to breathe, the guy's trying to stop you from breathing. Okay, so you bit him. Fair enough. I don't mind. And you could say, well, this foul's worse than that foul, but I don't care, because the problem with me, I suppose, is that I really don't care about the size of the foul in so long as it is not a completely flagrant foul by the referee's standards. If everyone else can see that the foul is occurring but the referee misses it, good. Then you got away with it. Congratulations. Now there's of course one, not exception to the rule, but one rule that one must keep in mind when fouling, if they're interested in pleasing me, which of course I'm sure they are. If you're going to foul, there's one rule. You have to have been in the game long enough to be good at fouling. I don't want to see some 22-year-old punk trying to get away with some little shot to the hip, but he has no concept of how to turn his man, how to keep it hidden from the referee, how to use his angles properly. Because then at this point, he's just punching a guy in the hip, and it's just blatant. The referee sees it, and it can potentially affect the outcome of a fight based upon fouling and, of course, deductions of points. I don't want to see that. Nobody wants to see that. You have to have been in the game a few years to know what you're doing when it comes to fouling. That's my only issue, to be quite honest with you. As long as you know what you're doing, and as long as you can get away with it, fine. I'm not particularly big on rabbit punches because those can have dramatic outcomes for the fighter's life and, of course, for the fight itself if you hit them hard enough. And, of course, you shouldn't hit a fighter when he's down because that, again, can affect the outcome of the fight. And also, he's a prone target. There's nothing he really can do to defend himself. So I'm not a fan of effectively cheap shots that are indefensible, literally and, morally. That's a difficult one for me to take and say, yeah, that's totally fine. But with pretty much everything else on the table insofar as fouls are concerned, I'm fine with them. Yeah, I have no problem. One of my favorite fighters of all time, and I don't think this is necessarily a secret, is Bernard Hopkins. Bernard Hopkins, I don't know his CompuBox numbers, but I would guess he probably is. He's a fairly accurate guy. I'd guess he lands about 35% of his shots. And the only reason it's that low for such a skilled fighter is because I would say probably a good portion of those shots that he probably does land are not countable shots because of where he decides to throw them. If you were able to count hip shots or low blows or little shots on the side or behind the head when they're in the clinch, this guy would be hitting with Mayweather accuracy, really. He's a bit of a dirty fighter. He'll deny it, which makes me happy that he denies such an obvious claim, but at the end of the day, I'm fine with it because, again, he's good enough that for the most part, he gets away with it. And to me, that is what makes a fighter a seasoned veteran. You hear all the time. You hear these things like, "Oh, he's a veteran. He knows all these little clever tricks and how to get away with things and everything like that." Yet every time you see a fighter do it, for some reason, fans feel the need to complain about it. Well, that's what you get with experience. You get better at the jab. You get better at defense. You get better at knowing yourself as a fighter. But you do pick up those tricks that make it hard for some of these younger guys to deal with you in the ring. That's the point. You have to be able to get through these sort of obstacles. And if you can't, well, you have to go back to the drawing board. You have to try and figure things out. You have to try and get to a point where you can deal with them. A prime example of this would be Vasil Lomachenko. Vasil Lomachenko, for whatever he becomes in his career, and I have, like most people, fairly high expectations for the Ukrainian, whatever he becomes in his career, to a certain extent, he will owe a great deal of gratitude to Orlando Salido. Because insofar as his first real fight is concerned, he could not have gotten much better in education. You're never going to be, if you're Vasil Lomachenko, which only one of us is, you're never going to be in a position where you're going to say, well, I just wasn't prepared for such a rough fight 2 or 3 years down the line. That's never going to be true. Because if you have the ability to mentally block out that sort of fight, you're never going to learn. You're never going to pick it up because that's the sort of bad experience that's going to linger with you forever. And you're going to have to remember it. You're going to have to remember the night that you were hitting the balls about 20 times. You're going to have to remember the night that you were held onto for dear life by a guy who just used effectively professional cunning to beat you. That is something you are not going to forget. And if you want to be truthful, in his victory, Vasil Lomachenko's victory over Gary Russell in his very next fight where he did pick up a portion of the featherweight title, he seemed to fight with a bit more toughness, with a bit more grit, with just more determination to go out there and put a hurting on his guy. Now, Russell's also a talented fighter, so he was able to put up a solid fight in his own right. And of course, it was a fairly competitive, but in my opinion, one-sided fight in terms of the scoring. I think Lomachenko clearly won the fight, but it was a competitive fight and it was a fairly clean fight. But at least I got the sense that Lomachenko could have gotten dirty if needed and could have dealt with dirty tactics if he had to. And that, to me, is part of boxing. It's not the prettiest part of the sweet science. It's not the sweetest part of the sweet science. But it is nonetheless a part of the sport. And I, to be quite honest, have no problem with it. I'll be honest, I'm an immature idiot when it comes to these sort of things. When I see them happen in a fight and a fighter gets away with it, it just kind of makes me giggle. It's just the truth. My personal take on it. Love to hear your guys' take. Of course, I'm sure I will. Leave it in the comments. I'll deal with all the love and the hate I get for such an admission by myself. That just is the truth, though. I'm fine with it. No problem whatsoever. I think, in many ways, people look at fouling as it's breaking the rules, so it must be bad. But this isn't just an expression that cheaters use. This is a fact. If you are not convicted of the crime, then no crime really was committed. And that's a terrible thing to think about when it comes to certain crimes, of course. And I'm not saying that something wrong didn't happen. But a crime is you breaking the law. But the law has to recognize that the crime has been committed before there's anything there. It's the same way in a ring. If you were not found to be a fouling fighter in that fight at that particular moment, then no foul was committed. Not on record. You can't score based upon it. The fighter can complain all he wants, but nothing is going to change his potential fortunes in that fight other than him just fighting. Nothing happened. We all know something happened, but nothing happened. So I have no problem again with fouling. My only problem is when fouling is obvious, and of course nothing is done about it, or it potentially changes the outcome of the fight. Now again, in Mayweather-Maidana, that one could make an argument that fouling was done on a consistent basis for effectively 12 rounds, and absolutely nothing was done about it. However, I don't blame Mayweather for holding, which is of course what I'm talking about. I blame referee Kenny Bayless for breaking them up when Maidana was still trying to work with the free hand, when there was a chance that Maidana could have wrestled his arms away for a second or two and potentially landed some shots, and not really letting Maidana fight his fight. I don't blame Mayweather for holding, though. I mean, Mayweather got away with the tactic. That's what you're supposed to do if you're given the ability to do it. If you were, for whatever reason, given the ability to speed and go 10 miles faster than you were supposed to, you'd probably do it. That's the way it works. Same thing happens again in the ring. If you're being allowed to get away with it, you will. And I have no problem with you doing that. I just have a problem with the officiating in this particular fight. I don't mind Kenny Bayless as a referee either, but I just think he happened to blow that because the fact of the matter is, Maidana was deducted a point for pushing Mayweather down to the canvas, yet he was effectively rushing the guy who had been holding him the whole night and had not even a warning, really, about holding. It was, a bit of a blown call and one of Bayless's more weak performances as an official. All that being said, I have no problem with the foulers, just, again, get away with it in the right way. And if you're not getting away with it in the right way, and it's not being called, then I don't blame you. I blame the referee. In any event, I'd love to hear your take, of course, on fouls. I want to hear your take on Mayweather-Maidana, of course. I want to hear your take on all the weekend's happenings, everything that went down, what you thought, what do you think, Mayweather might be doing next, all these sort of things. I'd love to hear about them. Go ahead and hit me up on that. You can also hear my take on Mayweather's, or rather, you can read my take on Mayweather's future in the most recent edition of Pot Shots. The link will be in the description. And, of course, be sure to click over to part 2 of 12-Rounder Radio, where I will be talking about the potential showdown between Scott Quigg and Carl Frampton, and giving you a bit of my personal take on that. Just basically discussing it. So, of course, be sure to click over, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Follow on Twitter at 12Rounder Boxing, and after you're done with all that, of course, click over to part 2.